JP, thank you so much indeed for joining me today.
It's mine.
Always great to have you. So listen, in the world we live in now and looking at leadership, what do you think are the most important aspects?
As you know, Nick, we do a fair amount of research. We survey over 40,000 people a month. And so we're always looking for what do the most effective leaders, most effective managers do? And here's what we know. We know that, most managers do most things pretty well. But in fact, let me tell you a quick story about this. I was doing a program 8 years ago to a CEO and their senior team, coaching two individuals because they weren't getting along, the CEO and their second in command. The CEO had been moved up from the senior team and the two of them weren't getting along. I was coaching them. So most of my time I keynote speak, as you know, but I also do a little bit of consulting, to senior teams, helping them work better together. And so they had a conversation, they weren't getting along. I coached them to have another conversation, they weren't getting along. The only thing they could agree on, they wanted me to coach them or have a mediated conversation. I said, sure. The three of us jump in, right? We have a 2.5-hour conversation. We finish, a couple of days later, I talked to each of them in these, our coaching calls. And I said, how'd it go? And they both said, oh my gosh, it went so much better. I said, great. Did you say everything you wanted to say? They both said, yeah, absolutely. I said, really? Like, I'm coaching them, Nick. I know they're not saying everything, right? So I pushed them a little bit and then they both agreed, and I pushed them because I'm a numbers guy. They both agree they probably left out about 5 or 10%, between 5 and 10%. And that's what started this for us, where we have found, we did a study of 34,000 people. Here's what we do. We walk into a conversation, let's say it's you and I, Nick, and I'm pretty good, you're pretty good, but I'm pretty good at getting to 85, 90, 92% of what it is that I want to say to you. But when I get to that more difficult part of the conversation, the last 8% of the conversation, here's what happens. As I'm getting to that last 8%, that most important part of the conversation, you're no dummy. You start to see that there are consequences attached to what I'm saying. You start to get triggered. You realize, hey, my career, pay, promotion, a whole bunch of things are now potentially, at risk. You get emotional. I get infected by your emotion. And then as opposed to me stepping in, facing that difficult conversation, I avoid it. Now, here's the problem. You can't read my mind. You don't know I didn't have the full conversation. I leave that conversation like these two executives thinking, yeah, I talked about most of the things I wanted to talk about, conveniently leaving out that last 8%. A month later, I'm looking at you going, Nick, what are you doing? I thought we had the conversation. Why are you still doing that? You're looking at me going, JP, why are you being so passive aggressive? I thought we're on track. We never had the last 8% conversation. George Bernard Shaw said the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. It never took place. This is a big differentiator, Nick, of high-performing managers and leaders. They step into that crucial last 8%. And it's not just conversations. It's decisions. It's tasks. On the decision side, there are two big ones that we see managers, mistakes they make around last 8% around decisions, which is this. Around people, they let underperformers hang around for far too long. And the rest of the team sees them not dealing with this underperformer. Or they don't move up high performers who are doing well because they're too young and they don't want to upset others by moving up people who are working hard and doing well. Both cases are a lack of leadership. And so the big difference we see is, can a manager or leader push into and execute on those last 8% conversations, decisions, and tasks? And that differentiates their career, but definitely the organization. So, you know me, I get pretty excited by new findings. That one to me, honestly, it's getting real resonance, I think, because people, right, they see it themselves, right? There's last 8% conversations you're avoiding, Nick. Me too, right? I'm a master at this. So I think that's a really important piece that managers and leaders need to get underneath.
So let me ask on that. And I was going to build up to it slowly, but I suppose I've got to jump in at this point. We moved to this digital world now, and we're having conversations via Zoom or whatever it is. How has that affected the conversations? How has it affected the last 8%?
I mean, you know what it's done? It's revealed. So in my prior book, Performing Under Pressure, I talked about the fact that we think, as we watch sports people, we think, oh, those, really great, athletes, they perform better under pressure. They don't. they get affected by pressure. The thing is, they get affected less by pressure than someone else, but they're still negatively, adversely affected by pressure. Okay, so that's important to understand that. Because what happens on the sporting field is that pressure reveals, the high performers. They get, affected less. It's the same with this virtual world. Those managers who have built up trust, those managers who have a real connection and a relationship, they're not affected, as opposed to those managers and leaders who, quite frankly, have been just in command and control style. They haven't built trust, and now they've been found out, at least on the management leadership side. So it's even more important. This is why managing emotions is even more important. Having psychological safety is even more important if we are going to have individuals in organizations who feel heard, who feel like they can take risks, right? That's one of the big, I want everyone watching this to think of this. In your organization, do people feel safe to offer up a potentially horrible idea, a different idea that at face value, it's like, oh, that's a crazy idea. But they still are not afraid to offer it, because what happens in innovation is that when someone's not afraid to offer that idea, somebody else grabs part of it, not all of it maybe, and scaffolds it up. That's how innovation takes place. But if you don't have that psychological safety, forget it. And so a manager and leader, this, again, it reveals those who have created psychological safety, who people feel safe. Look, they're still pushed. Psychological safety is not being soft on people. It's understanding their emotional needs. And if you meet them, then all of a sudden, people will give a ton of discretionary effort, that extra effort that makes all the difference.
Are leaders who don't have this, is it too late? How can they build that culture now?
That's a great question. I do believe in a lot of ways it's too late, in terms of those folks who work with those managers. They're not giving that extra effort. They're doing exactly what's written into their contract, but they're not going above and beyond it. And you fail as an organization if that's the case. This is why it's so important for organizations to really understand this, invest in their people, give coaching to those individuals who maybe they're managers who are not displaying, this ability that we're talking about, but actually want to do it, but are afraid to ask. Actually, it's very interesting. We found this in our data. There's a whole bunch of managers and leaders who score in the average, but they actually want to do much better, but they're afraid to ask for help, again, because of the culture. And so organizations need to really open their eyes and recognize, how can we give these tools to people who want it? Not everyone wants it, but more than people realize, so that they can learn how to coach and kind of build relationships, how to have those difficult last 8% conversations, how to make a tough decision, knowing it will hurt people, but you still have to do it, because leadership's not about being nice. It's about stepping in even when it's uncomfortable, because that's the right thing for the organization, for the relationship, for the team.
If over the last year, we as individuals, but also companies, have been looking very much at the mental health of all of us individually, to dealing with our stress, dealing with the change we've gone through, how is that related to the leaders kind of laying out the right platform?
Yeah. I mean, boy, I mean, we could talk for an hour on this one. There is such a mental health issue pre-COVID. Loneliness. I mean, the research on that. Like, this is such a real issue. And again, when there's more pressure, when there's something like COVID, it reveals more of the faults that we have in society and in organizations. I would say this. I think managers need to be equipped to notice when someone is falling under the pressure of work and it's revealing their mental illness. And if leaders can spot it, and there's a number of ways to do this, if they can spot it, they can build that trust and have that one-on-one conversation, they can help them through the difficult time. What I worry about is that, a lot of managers and leaders are so pushed, they're so overwhelmed with so much to do, so little time, and they don't just even know what to look for, that they don't know to ask the question, and maybe they haven't built that trust. And so it becomes even more of an issue. And, in my family, we've had some mental illness, and in my friends, and I maybe more sensitive to this. And I got to tell you, like, I have such a worry around this for society. But there's something we can do. That's the hopeful message, which is, we can do something as managers and leaders. We can do something, but it's about, like, here. Let me tell you the trap that so many managers fall into. There's two things going on in any interaction. There's a task being done and there's a relationship being built. Because so many of us are type A, it's just get the task done, boom, 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 that we fall into this task trap and we don't realize, oh, there's a relationship there. And I also have to pay attention to that, because if I do, we get all this discretionary effort, but we also have this view into what's going on, and maybe I can help them on the mental illness side if that's something that's manifesting.
Do you feel the leaders of today and kind of visionary leaders, in terms of the future of how we're going to be working, are we thinking that far ahead? Do we understand it, or are we caught dealing with too much with the moment?
Yeah, wonderful question. The forward-looking organizations pre-pandemic were already thinking about a hybrid workplace. Work 2 or 3 days from home, work 2 or 3 days from work. It doesn't have to be 9 to 5. Everyone's got different hours now. And what the pandemic has done is it's convinced a whole bunch of leaders who were like, no, this is not the way we do things, to recognize, no, you can do it in this different way. And by the way, when you give more control and autonomy, please, anyone listening, this is really important. When we give more control and autonomy to our people, they make better decisions. They really do. And so it's not too early. In fact, I think there's going to be a real shift in the workplace where more organizations are going to recognize, like, if the work gets done and people feel good about how the work gets done, isn't that really ultimately the best thing? And so more organizations than ever are really thinking about this. And by the way, I think that has bigger ramifications to our cities, the suburbs, to all of how we work and we commute, which is, by the way, a good thing, because in London or Toronto or New York, the commute in has been horrible. That's going to change a little bit. So, property prices, there's going to be a lot of consequences, but I think it's ultimately a good thing, even though this pandemic has been, as you and I talk about a lot, so challenging for so many groups, less you and I, even though we're in the events industry, but so many other marginalized groups that it has not been a great thing, but maybe this is one slight silver lining. And listen, if you're a manager or leader, really think about trust, building trust, building autonomy, and letting your people go and do great work. They want to do great work. And so that's a part of the message I get excited to deliver.
JP, as always, it's an absolute privilege and pleasure speaking to you. So thank you for your time, and have a lovely rest of the day.
Thanks so much, Nick. You too.